This build series is brought to you by Apex Cases and Seagate. Hello everybody, it's Brian for GadgetUnit.com, and this is part 7 of my PC build series, and in this video I'll actually be putting the build together. So I would actually rate this build to be sort of an advanced build because of the small workspace that we have inside of the case, but overall, since we aren't really dealing with ultra high-end components like dual graphics cards, water cooling systems, this should be fairly straightforward. So the first part of this build involves getting the motherboard set up, so that includes installing the processor, the heatsink fan, as well as our 2 DIMMs. So I'll start with the easy stuff, which would be installing our RAM, which again is our Patriot Viper series memory modules. So basically all you have to do is take your sticks, align them up with their slots here on the right side of the motherboard, and push them down into place. And the 2 latches, make sure you open those first, of course. And when you slide those into place and push them down, they should go ahead and snap back into their closed positions. So there's that one and that one. Now let's go ahead and do the second DIMM. So there's that one and that one. Alright, so our RAM is installed, and it looks very slick on this Gigabyte GA-H77N Wi-Fi mini ITX motherboard. Black heat spreader and black PCB, so everything matches very well. Next includes installing the processor. So we have to the right of the CPU socket this little latch that you have to push down, pull out, and lift up to go ahead and loosen off the actual cover here. Now we have this plastic note here that covers up our socket area itself, so go ahead and take that off. It says, always place this cover if the CPU is removed from socket. Please read user manual for details. This cover must be placed when returning the motherboard for after service. So here we have our processor, which again is the Intel Core i3 3225 processor, dual core hyper-threaded. So 2 logical cores, 2 physical cores, 4 logical cores. So make sure that you have it lined up properly. So on the left side, there's this little notch here on the left side of the processor. Just make sure that lines up with the little notch on the CPU socket itself. Pull your little door back down and pull your latch down. Don't be afraid to apply a lot of pressure to the latch itself. Make sure it's under there and securely into place. Now we have our heatsink fan. So for this build, I'm just going to be using the stock heatsink fan. I don't really have much of an option with the mini ITX case that I chose, just to keep things nice and compact. So I need to make sure that the fan cable is plugged into an area that's easily accessible on the motherboard. So I need to go ahead and locate the nearest 4-pin CPU fan header. Looks like there's one right here. There's another one right here. Let me go ahead and look up what they're actually labeled. This says sys fan. This one right here, I don't see any label near it. Okay, so yes, just a little bit to the left of these 4 pins, it says CPU fan, so that is where the cable will have to be plugged into. So we're going to have to, I think that the best orientation for this would be like this, so that the fan cable plugs right into that header. So the stock heatsink fan setup is very simple. So it looks like all of these plastic screws are already loosened, so I just need to line those up with the 4 holes on the motherboard, push down like so. So all 4 are pushed into place. Let me go ahead and plug in the fan real quick, like so. So our fan on this is plugged in. Some of the cables are in the way, so I need to unplug the fan and rework the cabling of the fan just a little bit. So I'm going to keep it like that. Going to move the fan cables all the way around the 4 push pins. And it's going to be a bit too tight, so that's not going to work very well. So for now, I'm just going to leave the cable hanging like so. Now we need to go ahead and tighten the 4 plastic screw things. So I'm going to go ahead and use a screwdriver to go ahead and do that. So just like that, it is secured into place. And one more. So now our CPU heatsink fan is now securely into place. You don't have to worry about this coming off or anything like that. So our motherboard is prepared. Now let me go ahead and bring the case into frame and we can start placing the motherboard into that. So now I have the case into view. This is the Apex MI-008. Now before we place the motherboard into place, we need to go ahead and put the I/O backplate onto the case first. So let me go ahead and open this up. These are typically sharp, so I would go ahead and be extra careful with the edges of this. So this is very easy to install. You just go into the case first and push those into place. Let me go ahead and flip the case around so I could show this to you. I'm just going to use this motherboard manual as a little protection thing for the front of the case. So it just slides in through the back of the case and it should just snap into place. There's that side. And we still need to get the left side. There it goes. Looks like it is in there all the way. Alright, so our I/O backplate is installed. Now we need to go ahead and get the motherboard mounted and screwed, which is probably the most difficult part of this build because we have so little room inside to actually really mess with anything. So here we go. I might have to take some of the case apart to get this going the right way, actually. So due to the lack of room that I have, I'm going to go ahead and unscrew the power supply and put that back after we have the motherboard completely mounted into the case and cabled up. So some of the cables include the front panel connections, which then include the front HD audio, front USB, and front button and LEDs. Also included in the cable portion would be the SATA 3 6 gigabit per second cable for our hard drive, which again is the Seagate Momentus XT 750 gigabyte hybrid hard drive. So all 4 screws are removed from the power supply, so I'm going to go ahead and carefully remove this from the case. Now we have much more room to work with, so this is definitely a step that everybody should take if you happen to purchase this case, which hopefully you do, because this case makes for an excellent build. So let me go ahead and put this sideways again. Alright, so our motherboard is now inside of the case. Now, the case already has standoffs so that you don't need to actually take standoffs and put them into the screw holes. So this makes sure that your motherboard is properly elevated for your I/O backplate. So let me go ahead and open up the little bag that came with the case so I can go ahead and screw in the motherboard. Now, in the unboxing video for this case, I said that I didn't know what these 2 plastic things are. I still don't know what these are. I think they're for your hard drives or whatever you decide to put into the case. Let me go ahead and take the PC speaker since I'll probably leave that plugged in for various diagnostic beeps. We have a whole bunch of screws going on. Let me go ahead and take off the 4 rubber plastic feet. So I'll probably mount this to the bottom of the case once everything is finished. And look, we get a single zip tie. Not 2, not 3, just 1 little zip tie. Now we have all of our screws. Just make sure I put these neatly onto my desk so that they don't go to places they don't need to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and take 4 matching screws. Then I'll go ahead and screw them onto the motherboard. Now, since this is mini ITX, there are just 4 screws that need to be screwed in to make sure that everything is securely mounted into the case. Basically, 1 in each corner of the motherboard. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. Finally, the motherboard is screwed into place. That took much longer than I thought it would, but due to the room constraints here, there's not really too much you could really do in that area. So now let's go ahead and plug in our front panel connectors. So we have first our front USB, which is this one, and we have our front HD audio, which is this one. This is for AC97 audio. We're not going to use that just because. So for this motherboard, our front USB is right here, right below our colored connections for our regular front panel connectors. So the cable needs to be oriented like this. Now we have to plug in our front panel connectors. This might be the most difficult because each one is for a different purpose. So this one is for our hard drive LED, some power LEDs, and our power switch itself. For this, you typically need to resort to your motherboard's manual. So here it tells us the layout for the front panel connectors that I just showed you, which are the colored ones on the other side of the USB plug. So the front panel cables are plugged in. Now we have to go ahead and plug in our HD audio, which is down here, right next to our CPU fan header. So that plugs in just like this. Okay, so our front panel, all the front panel things are connected. Now we have to go ahead and take our hard drive and get that connected. So here is our Seagate Momentus XT 750 gigabyte hybrid hard drive. I'll go ahead and get one of the included SATA 3 6 gigabit per second cables to come with the motherboard. I'm going to go ahead and use, well, I'll just go ahead and use the straight plugged one. Actually, I'll use the right angle one. That'll be a little bit easier to deal with. So one plugs into the, well, first I have to actually figure out where I'm going to place the hard drive. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and look at the included paper that came with the case to figure out where it says you should place this sort of thing. So this actually goes, typically it would be mounted over here. There's a little rail here that you use one of these plastic things for. But since I have a 2.5-inch drive, I have to kind of place it somewhere else. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and plug in the cables. So one goes into the SATA plug on our hard drive, which is this one. And this will plug into one of the black SATA ports on our motherboard. I'll just go ahead and pick this one. So our hard drive is plugged in. So excuse me, thanks for having the manual here. It's actually the white ones that are SATA 3 6 gigabit per second. The black ones are just SATA 2 3 gigabit per second. So everything's pretty much plugged in. Let me go ahead and get the power supply and get that back mounted into the case, and we can continue on from there. I'm just going to leave the hard drive hanging off the side of the case for now. I'll have to deal with that later, and I'll also have to deal with cable management a little bit later. Probably be something a little bit like this. Now that the power supply is back mounted into the case, we need to go ahead and unbundle these cables and start getting these plugged into the motherboard. So one of them is for the 4-pin CPU power connector, and I think I may have to take the power supply off again because it's really hard to get to that actual connector. Okay, so I just got the power supply all hooked up, so we are left with a bundle of power connections that we do not need. So that includes all of these Molex plugs, so 3 of them are included on the power supply. We don't need any of them. We have a total of 2 SATA power cables, but we only need 1 of them. So I still need to go ahead and figure out where I'm going to go ahead and mount the hard drive. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be back. So I decided that I'm just going to go ahead and mount the hard drive on this rail here, which is on the top right side of the case. I can only really attach 1 screw because this case is made for 3.5-inch hard drives, but I have a 2.5-inch drive, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the temporary alternate route. This should be okay as long as you don't plan on transporting this case, in which case you would actually have to, you'll be better off taking the hard drive out while you're shipping it around. So let me just go ahead and screw this in here, and we should be ready to go ahead and put the top back on the case and start getting Windows and Mac OS X going. So I'm going to go ahead and secure this fairly tight so that it's nicely into place, and it looks like it is. So the hard drive problem is solved, and it looks like I need to reroute this power cable because of the way I have this set up. Should have routed the power cable the other way around. And now it's time to go ahead and do a little bit of cable management. Thankfully, since we do not have a 3.5-inch hard drive or a 5.25-inch drive or a 3.5-inch internal drive like a card reader, we could go ahead and just place all of these cables inside don't really have to organize them too much. So it appears as though everything inside of the case is finished. So I'm going to go ahead and take the top of the case, which I put the 4 screws into, so I need to be extra careful. So here is the top of the case. I'm going to go ahead and slide it into place, and we're going to go ahead and plug in the power cable and press the power button and see how it goes. Now, some people believe in these superstitions where it would be recommended to go ahead and leave the cover open while you first turn on the PC, but that doesn't matter to me. I'm going to go ahead and close it up anyway because I think that we are going to be good to go for this one. So it appears as though the front cover is not properly in place. Let me go ahead and try that one more time. Okay, so the front cover is slid into place. I'm going to go ahead and take our 4 screws and screw them back into place on the back of the case. So since I'm in the back screwing things into place, let me go ahead and show you what the I/O panel looks like once the actual ports are displayed. So looks like everything is practically finished. Here we are taking a look at the front again, and you can see that the glossy plastic finish does result in plenty of fingerprints. So let me go ahead and get the power cable, plug it in. So the lights in the room just flickered. Now let me go ahead and push the power button on the front. So the power button lights up green, and we have a red hard drive indicator right there. You can see it flashing. And I hear the fan on the inside. I can see it spinning as well. So looks like this build is finished. Now the next video is going to include the BIOS setup as well as the Windows 8 EFI setup. The video following that will be the actual Hackintosh macOS 10.8 video. And then the video after that should be a sort of wrap-up video to conclude everything, give you some benchmarks in both macOS 10 and Windows. And that's it with this video. So if you have any comments, questions, or feedback about this or anything else, feel free to leave those down below in the comments area. But that's it with this video. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll talk to you all very soon.